I almost spoke. The words were already there. Not forming, formed. They sat just beneath the surface, clear enough to recognize, close enough to reach. I felt the moment approach. It didn't arrive loudly. It didn't demand attention. It appeared the way moments like this usually do, quietly, without signaling that it mattered. There was a pause. Brief, subtle. The kind of pause that doesn't last long enough to announce itself. But I noticed it. The room shifted slightly. Conversation slowed, just enough to leave space. That space felt intentional, as if it had been created for something. For me, I almost spoke. At first it felt natural to wait, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted the timing to be right. The words deserved that. I told myself that rushing them would make them lose their weight, so I stayed still, holding them where they were. The pause lingered. Not long, but long enough to be felt. I could have stepped into it. I knew that. The words were ready. I almost spoke. But the moment didn't hold. It shifted again, quietly closing the space it had opened. Someone else spoke. The rhythm returned. Conversation resumed, as if nothing had happened. The opening was gone. I stayed where I was, watching the moment move forward, without me. At the time, I told myself it didn't matter, that the words would find another place, another pause. Moments like this happen more than once. That belief felt reasonable. The room continued as it always did. Voices overlapped. Laughter appeared on time. Nothing suggested that I had missed anything, and yet, something had changed. The words didn't disappear. They stayed with me, still clear, still intact, but they no longer belonged to the moment unfolding in front of me. They belonged to the one that had just passed. I noticed how quickly the space adjusted, how easily conversation reorganized itself, without waiting. The room didn't look back. It didn't need to. I almost spoke, and that almost stayed with me longer than I expected. At first it felt insignificant, just a near action, a thought unexpressed. But the longer the moment moved away, the heavier that almost became. Not as regret, as awareness. I realized how thin the line is between speaking and not speaking, how small the difference can be between entering a moment and watching it pass. The pause hadn't been dramatic. It hadn't asked for courage. It had simply existed, and I had hesitated, not out of fear, but out of precision. I wanted the words to land exactly right. I wanted them to arrive without needing explanation. But precision requires timing, and timing doesn't wait. The moment didn't return. It didn't circle back or recreate the opening. It continued forward, becoming part of what had already happened. I stayed present, listening, observing. From the outside, nothing about my silence looked unusual. I nodded at familiar points, smiled when it felt appropriate. I remained aligned with the surface of things, but inside, the words stayed unfinished. I noticed how easily the room learned to continue without expecting them, how naturally the space closed around itself. There was no tension, no sense of loss. Everything worked. And that made the silence feel justified. I told myself that almost speaking was close enough. That intention mattered. That recognizing the moment was something in itself. And maybe it was. But intention doesn't enter the room. Only action does. The longer I stayed quiet, the more distant the words became. Not because they faded, but because the context changed. What would have fit earlier now felt misplaced. Speaking now would have required explanation, not of what I meant, but of why I hadn't spoken sooner. That wasn't what I wanted, so I stayed quiet. Again, almost speaking became familiar, a pattern I didn't notice forming. Each time a pause appeared, I measured it carefully. Each time, I waited just a moment longer. The difference between almost and actually felt small, negligible. But small differences accumulate. The room adapted. Conversation flowed, without leaving space. The pauses grew shorter, less noticeable, and eventually, they stopped appearing at all. I realized then that moments don't keep offering themselves. They appear, wait briefly, and move on. They don't announce which ones matter. They don't repeat themselves. For clarity, I almost spoke because I believed there would be another chance. Another pause. Another opening. But openings don't line up. They belong to specific moments, specific arrangements of people and time. Once passed, they don't return in the same form. I don't know what would have happened if I had spoken. Maybe nothing would have changed. Maybe everything would have... There's no way to know. Almost doesn't leave evidence behind. It doesn't show what could have been. It simply lingers as awareness. I almost spoke. And the world continued, adjusting effortlessly, learning how to move forward without what I nearly said. By the time I understood what that moment had been, it no longer existed as something I could step into. It had already become part of the past, quiet, unresolved, complete without me. I almost spoke. And that almost was the only trace the moment ever left behind.